As Iran and Israel exchange missile fire, cyber attack warnings blare across the United States, and NATO gives the green light for strikes on Russia, the world is sitting on edge of World War III. But how did we get here? Have you ever wondered why Death to America is such a popular chant in the Middle East? Well, today we're going to talk about one of the reasons that Iran specifically loves to hate us, and how centuries of history have transpired into such hostility today. Welcome to the Blockchain Bunker. It has been way too long, my dwellers. Here is where we come to talk about the macro, the politics, and the hidden details where that wily devil dares to live. The Blockchain Bunker is powered by Arculus. Big shout out to them for pursuing sovereignty and self-custody, and make sure to get your hands on one today with a discount on us by using code BASE10 at checkout and the link to your Arculus wallet in the description below. Iran, once the great empire of Persia back in 1856, was sliced up by the British after losing the Anglo-Persian War. The current borders were defined in the Anglo-Iranian Agreement of 1872, which was described as a complete and extraordinary surrender of Iranian resources. This obviously was a scathing humiliation, and you could say this was what initially catalyzed the incessant rage of Iranians against the West. The British took control of the nation's oil, minerals, and set up their own banks to print plenty of filthy fiat and help themselves to huge swaths of lands for growing tobacco. Now, we all know that oil is a linchpin of conflict within the Middle East, and that came to a head once again in 1913 when the British declared that Iranian oil was actually property of the British. Not only did it claim the rights of their oil, but they also installed themselves as the owner of the Iranian National Treasury and a complete control of their military as well. It wasn't until 1953 that this agreement became hotly contested when Mohammad Mossadegh was democratically elected by the citizens of Iran. The thing that made him so popular was his declaration to reclaim Iranian oil from the West, taking back the rights of their own treasury and military. This, of course, did not sit well with the British, who then conspired with the United States to lead a coup led by the CIA. They funded a more friendly ally to the West to take the helm, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was deeply resented by the natives for being a puppet of the West. Pahlavi secured the oil for Western nations and installed a brutal secret service police that terrorized the people of Iran and anyone who opposed him. This period of government was pockmarked with the corruption and economic disaster that led up to the Islamic Revolution of the 1970s, which finally succeeded in 1979. Ayatollah Khomeini became the figurehead of this movement and returned from exile after Pahlavi strategically fled to the United States that year of. So we have already summed up about 100 years of built-up rage so far and how the US got wrapped up in Iran's affairs. Obviously, the natives were not too pleased that Pahlavi was not present to be put on trial, and then responded by raiding the United States Embassy, capturing 53 diplomats. Despite many failed attempts at rescuing these said diplomats, they were held hostage for well over a year. Then Iraq starts getting mixed up into these conflicts, where a slew of attacks back and forth continue to add fuel to the fire back in the 1980s. Over 200 Marines were bombed, and a passenger plane of Iranian citizens was shot down, and it was all bad news. Eventually, Iran was pushed over the edge and decided to start developing nuclear weapons, and that has never sat well with the West, all things considered. What I'm getting at here is that Iran has been the thorn in the shoe of the West for a very extended period of time, and the crimes against one another is a deluge. The wars have been disastrous and costly because the Shia-led military of Iran and their politicians rose to power in a very threatening way against the West. In the meantime, we've earned ourselves the nickname here in the US as the Great Devil, and Iran expanded their influence to Lebanon, funding Hezbollah, Yemen with the Houthis, and Hamas in Palestine. A network of discontent that is causing havoc in the Middle East right now. In more recent history, of course, Trump denied the nuclear deal with Iran and assassinated their key military leader, Qasem Soleimani, which I'm sure they didn't appreciate very much and made headlines across the globe. In step with American political style, we have sanctioned Iran to Valhalla, and the most recent death of their president, Ebrahim Rais, is being blamed on those aviation sanctions. These have impeded Iran from being able to acquire better aviation equipment, and so they have been operating with outdated systems from the Vietnam War era. But it is worth mentioning that Rais, who rose to power in 2021, was not such a stand-up guy either, even in the eyes of his own people. He was unpopular for slaughtering thousands of political prisoners back in 1988, and he reinstated the brutal morality police who executed many women and minorities. In 2022, the death of Gina Mahsa Amini at the hands of said police, having a loose hijab, sparked women, life, and freedom protests that bordered on revolution. It seems that even some of our so-called enemies have similar values, something that fundamentalist Islamic religious leaders like Rais harbor absolute resentment towards. But if this is what we are remembered for as Americans, I personally feel very proud to incite the values of freedom, the right to life, and of course our better halves. But all signs are pointing to them aligning with BRICS, and how the impending changes in world leadership will move this country forward. But it is my opinion that BRICS nations and their own interests are going to be at the forefront of Iranian decisions. In the best of circumstances, the voices of the people will be heard, and the funding of terrorist groups can be stalled, and the continued war could still be averted. The world is sitting on the edge of Iran's decision, as the rest could be history. And if you like this episode of the Blockchain Bunker, drop a like and leave your mark down in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more, and until the next one, dwellers, Druth out.